serious? What happened in your "this is not a drill" moment during work, school, etc.? I was in the high school gym donating blood when the alarm for an active shooter lockdown went off. The doors were quickly locked and people were told to remain calm and duck under tables, but those of us giving blood and hooked up to the machines had to stay in place. It turned out to be that a few young men had stolen a car and had driven it recklessly onto school property. A police helicopter had somehow gotten involved, which sparked the panic. There were no guns involved, thank goodness, but it definitely was not a good first-time donating blood experience. I live in a small condo complex that backs up against a major highway, separated by a tall barrier that's part concrete, part decorative wood. So it's like 5 a.m. and I'm dead asleep and the house shakes. I roll over, thinking, man, someone set up fireworks way too late in the night. I'm barely asleep again, and it shakes. This time I hear that boom, and I'm like, frick those firework-loving kids. Well, I'm awake, might as well use the bathroom. So I'm in the bathroom, and the house shakes again, boom. So I look out the back window, and there's an inferno just past the backyard, right where the lawn meets the barrier. Oh, and this is right after all those people burned to death in their houses in CA. Nope. Wake up the husband, shove the cat in the carrier, grab your wallet, get in the car and leave. The only exit from the complex is right past the inferno. But we make it okay. The cat's pissed. The husband doesn't see what the big deal is, he's still mostly asleep. And I'm like, where can we go watch the news in our pajamas? So at the neighborhood Starbucks we're watching on our phones. The local fire department hosing down our condos with fireproof foam. A gas tanker caught fire and pulled over. Then the 3 compartments caught fire individually. The driver made it out. Our place was fine. And now I have a go bag, just in case. I was at a movie theater, one of the big ones with 12 screens. Halfway through the movie an alarm goes off and no one really reacts. And then a recorded voice advising that an emergency situation has arisen and we are to vacate the area immediately. 12 screens emptying simultaneously into the foyer created havoc. Some minor crush injuries. People falling and tripping others. It was chaos. Kids screaming. Parents trying to get in to find their kids. 5 minutes later and we are still inching towards the doors. And a real voice comes on and advises it was a false alarm and to go back and they will restart the movies. Important lesson from this for everyone: if you need to evacuate from a movie theater, take the exit near the screen that goes straight out of the building, and not the one that goes back to the foyer. One day at work there was a huge bang. Not what you want here at a refinery. Site goes into evacuation. Managers running around trying to find out what's happened. Turns out an asphalt truck had exploded next door, rocking our site. Many undies were soiled that day. It was just at home, but I think it was May 2019. We're about to leave for a funeral and there was a sudden earthquake. I think it was a 6 and it was surreal as it was the strongest earthquake I've felt. We took shelter under door frames and nobody was hurt, gladly. I was taking the SAT. We were maybe 30 minutes into the writing section when the fire alarm goes off. Some guy started a fire in the computer lab of the building because he didn't bring proper ID and they wouldn't let him take his test. We had to sit outside for 3 hours in silence before they decided, never mind, you guys have to retake this in a month. We were all in psychophysiopatho class when the alarm bell rang. It's a class where the whole lot of us are divided in random 25 people group of students. I didn't know any of the people in this group very well, but we were polite to each other. The teacher said no drill was supposed to take place, so we all raced the best we could outside, except I was in crutches at the time. And the building we were in was old and had a lot of stairs. I was lagging behind, getting more and more scared that I would be left alone. Our teacher was already out. and the bulk of the group was far ahead, and I had no friends in here to make sure I was safe. But 4 of my classmates, all girls, noticed I was struggling and doubled back to help me. It could have been any kind of danger, a fire, a dumbass with a weapon. But they didn't hesitate 1 second once they saw me. One of them took my med bag. Another took my crutches. The other 2 put my arms around their shoulders and half pushed me out, half carried me out. I was viewing a traveling exhibit about the Titanic. When you entered the exhibit, you were given a ticket which had the name of an actual person aboard the Titanic. At the end you would get to see if they survived or not. Right as we finished seeing if our person lived or died, the fire alarm went off in the museum. The exhibit staff ushered everyone into the staff area behind the exhibit and down the emergency stairs. Everything was lit with emergency lighting only and really cramped. And after having just been in the exhibit, you really felt like you were escaping a sinking ship. Probably the most surreal emergency I've ever experienced. Edit for those asking. Yes, my person did survive. They tried to match your person as close to you as possible. I was a kid at the time, so my person was a child. Much higher chance of surviving if you were a kid or a woman. Kid brought a gun to school. He wanted to show it off, and pulled it out at lunch. Yeah, you're not supposed to freaking do that. He got expelled, was relieved of any actual criminal charges on account of no bullets were brought, and he was so young. But everyone dipped from the lunchroom and all the other classes got locked down. I remember being in class when it happened, and not one of us thought it was real because our school did a drill every quarter for that poop, and it was like midway through one of them. This was 8th grade. One tornado hit our house. We heard the sirens. My dad and I woke up my mom and brother, and we barely made it to the basement before it hit. 2. Active shooter outside my job. It was some young kid who was running around and waving a gun around like it was some toy. He tried to get into the store I worked at. Fortunately, I had already locked them because it was closing time. I had my employees hide in the fridge while I called 911. I was teaching at a high school a couple years back when my co-teacher came over from the next room and quietly asked if I had checked my email recently. I had not. When I looked, there was an urgent message from admin telling us that we were currently under a stay-in-place lockdown. Apparently, some guy had gotten into a shootout with local PD earlier, ran and was currently somewhere just off campus, still armed and dangerous. But since he wasn't an immediate threat, we were not to tell the students and continue class as normal. If the lockdown lasted into the next period, they'd come up with an excuse to keep all the kids in place. The kicker for me was that one entire wall of my classroom was floor-to-ceiling windows. To make it worse, the ceiling in my room was approximately 20 feet. We may as well have been sitting in the field outside my room for all the security we had. I made a quick decision to shoehorn a slideshow into my lesson, so I had a believable excuse to close all the blinds. Luckily, the lockdown only lasted until just before the end of the period, so nobody had to punt on an excuse for what was happening. I like to think I covered well and that none of my students noticed that I was freaking out internally. None of them ever questioned me about it, so hopefully I did.